Imagine a tribe marked by courage, tragedies, and great twists of fate. The smallest of the tribes of Israel, yet also one of the most intriguing. Have you ever heard of the tribe of Benjamin? Its name carries the weight of history and the pain of a farewell. For Benjamin was the youngest son of Jacob, with his beloved wife Rachel, and he was born amid the mourning of his mother's death. But what happened to his descendants? Why was this tribe almost erased from the history of Israel? And how, even after facing destruction, did it become fundamental in shaping the chosen people? The story of the tribe of Benjamin in the Bible is filled with mysteries, redemption, and characters who left a lasting impact on generations, such as the first king of Israel, Saul, and the apostle Paul, who influenced the world with his letters. Get ready, because in this video we will uncover the highs and lows of this lineage, from its glories to its darkest moments. After all, what does the story of Benjamin and his descendants still have to teach us? Jacob always had a special love for Rachel. From the moment he saw her near the well, he felt something different for her. To marry Rachel, he worked for 7 years, but he was deceived by Laban and had to work another 7. Even so, she was always his greatest joy, his companion, and the mother of his sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Rachel spent many years suffering because she could not have children, while her sister Leah had already given Jacob several heirs. But at the right time, God answered her prayers and gave her Joseph. Now, after so long, Rachel was expecting another child. For Jacob, it was a gift from God, strengthening even more the love he felt for her. Jacob's caravan was traveling when they approached Ephrathah, which would later be called Bethlehem. It was at that moment that Rachel began to feel labor pains. The childbirth was long and difficult. The women assisting her realized that something was wrong. Rachel was very weak, and each effort to give birth left her even more exhausted. When the baby was finally born, Rachel, already without strength, looked at him with eyes full of tears. The cry of the little one filled the air, but she knew she would not have the strength to hold him for long. Struggling to breathe, she whispered softly, "Benoni." Her voice was weak, almost a whisper. The women around her tried to comfort her, but there was nothing they could do. With one last glance at her son and a tear rolling down her face, Rachel departed. When Jacob received the news, he felt as if his world had collapsed. Rachel, the woman he had fought so hard for, the mother of his children, his great love, was no longer there. His heart was filled with sorrow. He took the baby in his arms, the last gift from Rachel. But the name she had chosen, Benoni, reflected all the pain of that moment. Son of my sorrow. Jacob did not want the boy to carry that burden for the rest of his life. Instead, he chose a name that represented love and protection. He called him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. He wanted his son to be remembered not for the loss, but as a blessing, a living legacy of Rachel. Even with a broken heart, Jacob had to move forward. He buried Rachel right there, near the road to Bethlehem, and placed a stone over the tomb so he would never forget her. That place became a landmark, remembered for generations as Rachel's tomb. Time passed, and Benjamin grew up surrounded by the love of his father and brothers. Being the youngest in the family, Jacob always had a special affection for him, as he saw in the boy a living reminder of Rachel. Benjamin grew up strong and courageous, and in the future, his descendants would give rise to one of the most important tribes of Israel. But life would still bring challenges for Jacob and his family. Famine took over the land, the crops dried up, the rivers shrank, and food began to run out. In Canaan, Jacob and his sons suffered from scarcity until they heard that there was still food in Egypt. With no other choice, Jacob sent his sons to fetch provisions, not imagining that this journey would change their lives forever. The brothers left, unaware that this journey would transform their destiny. What they did not suspect was that the powerful governor of Egypt, the one who controlled the entire land, was none other than Joseph, the brother they had sold as a slave many years ago. The boy they abandoned was now an important man, dressed as a ruler and respected by all. When they arrived in Egypt, They were taken to the governor and bowed before him, unaware that he was Joseph, but he recognized them immediately. His heart pounded. There they were, standing before him, not knowing who he truly was. The years had passed, but Joseph had never forgotten what had happened. Had his brothers changed? Then Joseph decided to test them. He looked at them and said firmly, "You are spies." The brothers were terrified and tried to explain. They said they were sons of the same father and mentioned that they had a younger brother who had stayed home. Upon hearing this, Joseph saw an opportunity to discover whether their hearts had truly changed. He then declared that if they wanted more food, they would have to bring their younger brother on the next trip. But this was a huge problem. Jacob would never allow Benjamin, his youngest son and the only son left of Rachel, to travel so far away. When the brothers returned home and told Jacob everything, he was desperate. "I have already lost Joseph, and now you want to take Benjamin?" No, he will not go. The pain was still deep in his heart. Joseph was gone, and Benjamin was his last reminder of Rachel. Days passed, and the famine only worsened. There was no other choice. Without food, everyone would die. Then Judah gathered his courage and said to his father, "I promise that Benjamin will return. If anything happens to him, I will pay for it with my own life." Jacob, even with a heavy heart, knew he had no other option. So he allowed Benjamin to leave with his brothers on the journey to Egypt. When Joseph saw Benjamin for the first time, his eyes filled with tears. He tried to hide his emotions, but had to leave to cry alone. His own brother, the son of the same mother, was there, alive, healthy, standing right before him. But Joseph still needed to be sure that his brothers had truly changed. During a great banquet, Joseph ordered his silver cup to be placed inside Benjamin's sack of grain. The next day, when the brothers departed, the guards caught up with them and accused them of theft. They were in shock when the cup was found in Benjamin's bag. The sentence was given. Benjamin would have to stay in Egypt as a slave. Then Judah stepped forward and pleaded, "No, let me stay in his place. Our father will not survive losing him. I offer myself in his stead." That act deeply touched Joseph's heart. They had truly changed. Before, they had sold Joseph without hesitation, but now they were willing to sacrifice themselves to protect Benjamin. Joseph could no longer hold back his tears. He asked everyone to leave the room, leaving only his brothers. His heart was pounding. He took a deep breath and, weeping, revealed, "I am Joseph, the brother you sold." Silence filled the room. The brothers were frozen. They could not believe it. The powerful governor standing before them was the same brother they had betrayed so many years ago. Fear gripped their hearts. Would he seek revenge? But Joseph smiled through his tears and said, "Do not be afraid. God turned evil into good. He sent me here ahead of you to save our family from famine." The brothers wept together and embraced. The past was left behind, and the family was restored. Joseph sent messengers to bring Jacob and invite him to live in Egypt, where they would have food and safety. When Jacob received the news that Joseph was alive, he could hardly believe it. But when he saw the evidence before him, his heart filled with hope. Thus, Jacob set out with his entire family for Egypt. There, he was reunited with his beloved son, Benjamin, and all the descendants of Israel settled in that land, fulfilling God's purpose. Over time, Jacob's family grew and became a great people. His sons became the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel, fulfilling the promise that God had made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Among these tribes was the tribe of Benjamin, formed by the descendants of Jacob's youngest son, the boy who was born in sorrow, but whose name came to represent honor and strength. Even though it was the smallest of the tribes of Israel, Benjamin quickly stood out for the bravery of its warriors. They were swift, skilled, and experts in the use of slings and bows. Their strategy and speed made them one of the most feared armies among the Israelites. When Joshua led the people in the conquest of the Promised Land, the lands were divided according to God's guidance. The tribe of Benjamin received a very important region, located between the tribes of Judah and Ephraim. Although small, its position was strategic, lying at the center of Israel's main routes and conflicts. Within the territory of Benjamin, there were important cities such as Gibeah, Mizpah, and Bethel, which would later play an essential role in the history of Israel. The most remarkable thing about this tribe is that within its land was Jerusalem, the city that in the future would become the heart of the nation. At that time, however, it was still inhabited by the Jebusites, a warrior people who resisted the Israelite conquest for many years. Even so, the land of Benjamin was one of the most strategic in Israel. Located between the north and south of the country, it was an essential passage point and the stage for great biblical events. One of the most striking characteristics of the tribe of Benjamin was its skill in warfare. Its warriors were highly trained, and among the most famous were the slingers, soldiers who used slings to launch stones with such precision that they could hit a single strand of hair without missing. In addition, the tribe of Benjamin had many left-handed warriors, which gave them a great advantage in battle. Since most armies were used to fighting against right-handed soldiers, the attacks of the Benjamites caught enemies by surprise. This made them feared and respected in combat. As time passed, this small tribe continued to stand out as a symbol of strength, resilience, and courage. But its story was far from over. In the future, great leaders would emerge from it, and the name of Benjamin would be remembered for many generations. However, the tribe of Benjamin also faced one of the darkest moments in the history of Israel. A terrible event led to a war that nearly wiped out the entire tribe. It all began in the city of Gibeah, one of the most important in Benjaminite territory. There, a group of wicked men committed a cruel crime against an innocent woman. The act was so horrific that it shocked the entire nation. The news spread quickly, and the other tribes of Israel united to demand justice. The leaders of Israel sent messengers to the tribe of Benjamin, asking them to hand over the guilty men for punishment. But instead of correcting the mistake and delivering the criminals, the Benjamites refused. To them, accepting the demand of the other tribes would be a sign of weakness and dishonor. This decision led to a devastating war. The other 11 tribes of Israel united and gathered a massive army of 400,000 soldiers to fight against their own brothers. Even though they were outnumbered, the Benjamites did not surrender. With only 26,000 warriors, they were highly trained and famous for their skill with slings and swords. The battle was intense. In the beginning, the Benjamites showed their strength and defeated thousands of soldiers from the other tribes. But over time, the difference in the number of warriors began to take its toll. Then, the tribes of Israel set up a trap. Using a well-planned strategy, they set fire to the city of Gibeah and surrounded the Benjamites. The attack was overwhelming, and by the end of the battle, nearly the entire tribe of Benjamin had been destroyed. Only 600 men managed to escape. They fled to the caves in the wilderness, hiding like fugitives while their homes were burned and their lands devastated. The tribe that was once known for its courage was now reduced to a small group of survivors, scattered and without hope. After the destruction, a feeling of regret filled the hearts of the other tribes. What have we done? They realized that, driven by fury, they had nearly wiped out one of the 12 tribes of Israel, the chosen people of God. Without women and children, Benjamin was on the brink of extinction, so the other tribes had to find a solution. They could not allow a part of God's people to disappear. But there was a problem. They had made a vow not to give their daughters in marriage to the Benjamites. To overcome this, they decided to allow the survivors to take wives from other tribes, ensuring the continuation of Benjamin's lineage. Thus, even after almost being wiped out, the tribe of Benjamin managed to rise again. Over the years, their descendants grew once more and returned to inhabit their lands. This story is one of the saddest and most striking in the Bible. It shows how division among brothers can lead to destruction, but it also teaches that God's grace allows new beginnings, even in the most difficult situations. The tribe of Benjamin, which had almost disappeared, was not forgotten by God. He still had a plan for these people. Over time, great leaders emerged from this tribe, changing the course of Israel's history. Many years later, the people of Israel began to complain. They wanted a king. They no longer wanted to be ruled by judges and prophets. They desired a human leader to guide them and lead them in battles, just as the other nations had. God heard their request and chose a man for this mission, Saul, son of Kish, from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul was not only a Benjamite, but a tall, strong, and imposing man who drew attention wherever he went. However, he was humble and never imagined that he could be a king. When the prophet Samuel anointed him and revealed that he would rule Israel, Saul was surprised and said, "But I am only a Benjamite from the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family is the least within the tribe of Benjamin." 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 21. Even though he felt small and insignificant, God chose him to be the first king of Israel. This showed that despite the war and near extinction, the tribe of Benjamin still had an important role in history. During his reign, Saul achieved many victories and helped strengthen Israel as a kingdom. Unfortunately, his story had a tragic ending. Because of his disobedience, he drifted away from God and lost the throne to David from the tribe of Judah. But the fact that the first king of Israel was a Benjamite showed that God still had plans for this tribe and continued to use it in a special way. Centuries later, in the powerful Persian Empire, a young woman descended from the tribe of Benjamin would change the history of the Jewish people. Her name was Hadassah, better known as Esther. Orphaned since childhood, she was raised by her cousin Mordecai, who cared for her as a daughter. Esther lived in a difficult time for the Jews. The king Ahasuerus, ruler of the empire, was searching for a new queen, and Esther was chosen for her beauty and grace. But her destiny went far beyond simply sitting on the throne. God had a great plan for her life. A man named Haman, one of the most powerful officials of the king, devised a terrible plan to exterminate all the Jews in the empire. Without knowing that Esther was Jewish, he convinced the king Ahasuerus to sign a decree ordering the death of all Jewish people. It seemed there was no way out. Then Mordecai sent a message to Esther and said, "Who knows if it was not for such a time as this that you became queen?" Esther chapter 4, verse 14. Filled with courage and faith, Esther decided to act, even knowing that it could cost her life. She entered the king's presence without being summoned, something forbidden and punishable by death. But God was with her. With intelligence and wisdom, Esther revealed Haman's plan and told the king that she was also Jewish. Furious, the king reversed the decree and saved the Jewish people from destruction. The story of Esther shows how God used a young Benjamite to save her entire nation, proving once again that he always has a purpose, even in the most difficult moments. Once again, the tribe of Benjamin played an essential role in the history of God's people. A young Benjamite, Esther, saved the entire nation of Israel. Many centuries later in the New Testament, another Benjamite would change the history of the world. His name was Saul of Tarsus, who would later be known as the Apostle Paul. Before knowing Jesus, Paul was a persecutor of Christians. As a Pharisee and scholar of the law, he believed that the followers of Jesus were wrong. But one day, while traveling to Damascus, intending to arrest Christians, he had a supernatural encounter with Jesus. Suddenly, a very bright light shone around Saul, and he fell to the ground. Then he heard a powerful voice saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" It was Jesus himself speaking to him. From that moment on, Saul's life changed completely. He stopped persecuting Christians and became one of the greatest preachers of the gospel. Now known as Paul, he traveled through many nations, spreading the message of Christ, founded churches, and wrote letters that today form part of the Bible. In one of his letters, Paul proudly declared, I am from the tribe of Benjamin. Romans chapter 11, verse 1. This shows that even after so many generations, God continued to use the descendants of Benjamin to fulfill his purposes. The story of this tribe is proof that God transforms tragedies into new beginnings. From a tribe that was nearly destroyed came a king, a queen who saved Israel, and an apostle who carried the gospel to the entire world. Even when everything seemed lost, God showed that there was still a plan, a purpose, and a future for the descendants of Benjamin. This teaches us that, no matter how great the difficulty, God can restore and raise up those who trust in him. If you enjoyed this video, share it so that more people can learn about this incredible story. Write in the comments if you already knew the story of Benjamin in the Bible. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. May God bless you.